Good evening. I wanted to share my experience with unwitnessing for the first time. I'll try to keep this video as brief as I can because I don't know how much time I have on my phone. Myself, my partner Emily, and Christian Freedom, who no doubt many of you know, spent the afternoon together. We went to a farmer's market, walked around, we had lunch together, we had coffee, and one of the unexpected things that happened is we bumped into two Jehovah's Witnesses manning two literature carts. I at first wasn't sure I had the nerve to approach them, but I wanted to share a picture, or I wanted to have a picture taken of me showing my tattoo. That was actually Christian Freedom's idea, and I'm really glad I did it. I didn't think I was going to have the nerve to talk to him though, and it turns out that I did, only because Emily and Christian Freedom jumped right in there. And Christian Freedom right out of the gate started talking about the Australian Royal Commission investigation on child abuse cover-up. He said that he had some family that was Jehovah's Witness, so he was under that premise he was able to be a little bit more pointed in some of the things he brought up. Whereas when they asked us what we believe, I said I was agnostic. I think Emily said something to the same effect. We all kind of agreed about that. But none of us said that we were ex-witnesses, because that would have ended the conversation, of course. But we talked for quite a while. I don't know, maybe longer than a half hour? Felt like a long time. And it went great. We were able to catch them in a number of lies. I'm not going to be able to remember this as a consistent narrative, so I'll do my best to hit some of the high points. Emily talked a lot about the way women are treated in the organization, about how if they wanted to give a Sunday sermon, that wouldn't be an option for them, that really they are not treated equally within the organization. And the woman, Jehovah's Witness, was having that conversation with Emily primarily, and it was very squirrely. She would not give straight answers for the conversation, and very strongly implied that if you have the right attitude, if you're humble, you won't have a problem with it. So anybody who's got a problem, any female that has a problem with the way women are viewed in the organization, well, they're the ones with the problem. Christian Freedom was able to catch them in a lie having to do with the leadership being God's channel, that sort of thing, that the faithful and discreet slave are God's channel. That's one of the major insider doctrines that they don't expect to be confronted with, and there was some denying going on there. I wasn't paying close attention, so I can't quote exactly what it was, but he definitely caught him in a lie regarding God's channel. He said something about the Bible Teach Book, and that the governing body, the phrase governing body, is not in the Bible Teach Book, and the guy denied that was the case, but in fact it is true. And let's see, he made the point that the faithful and discreet slave, the whole concept of the faithful and discreet slave is based on a parable, and that this is kind of the central teaching of Jehovah's Witnesses, as far as why they should be believed, that they have the one and only faithful and discreet slave. And that's not a concept that's really addressed. Faithful and discreet slave might be in the Bible Teach Book, but the import of that, and certainly the governing body, is not in the Bible Teach Book. So there's kind of the three main insider doctrines. There's the leadership, the idea that the governing body are God's channel. There is the shunning of those who no longer believe it's the truth. And there is the concept that only Jehovah's Witnesses will be saved. And we got them to lie on all three of those. So my part of the conversation was mostly dealing with, or a couple high points, where I remember talking to them, and I painted the scenario of, well, I started off talking about my mother. She was raised Catholic, and I said she eventually decided that the Catholic Church wasn't the one true church, and she officially removed herself from the roster of the Catholic Church. I didn't mention that she became one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but the fact is, she said she didn't want to be a Catholic anymore. And I said it was hard on the family, it was hard on her parents. They weren't thrilled with it, they were disappointed. But they never disowned her, and they still love her, and they still associated with her regularly. And I said, we kind of found out a little bit of background, especially about the woman, the female Jehovah's Witness, and she said that, well, it's clear that she had been born in. Her parents were witnesses, she was raised around the witnesses, she got baptized when she was 17, I think, and she made it seem like, she reached a point where she just decided to make a choice, she did her own research, and of course that's the story we all told. It wasn't about being forced, there was no indoctrination, or, we weren't forced to believe it was the truth. So, a lot of the stuff that she was saying, that both of them were saying, I remember saying myself so many times and knowing in the back of my mind that I was not being forthright, or that I was using theocratic warfare. So anyways, I asked her, do you, if you were to decide, well, first I asked her, if you hadn't gotten baptized, would it have been a problem? She says, well, my parents would have been disappointed. And I said, okay, so let's say that now that you are baptized, would you, and you decided that, you know what, let's say you read a book about a different doctrine, or you read a science book, or something that led you to believe that this organization is not teaching the truth, and that your conscience wouldn't allow you to stay in that organization anymore, and you were to officially leave. I wanted to make it clear that that she would be drawing a line in the sand and saying, I don't believe this anymore. I says, would your family treat you any differently, or would they stop associating with you? And I think Christian Freedom said, he even used the word shunning, or shun. And she said, no. She looked right at us and she said no. She said they'd be disappointed, and the guy was corroborating this, that they would be disappointed, but we would still treat each other like family. That was really hard for me to not tip my hand at that point. I wanted to say, my parents live 15 minutes away, and I left because I didn't believe it. I didn't leave because I committed a wrongdoing, or I was afraid of getting disfellowshipped. I left because I didn't believe it anymore, and now my parents shun me, and they won't respond to texts, they won't accept gifts from me, they won't speak to me at all. I'm completely shunned. I've lost my parents. But I didn't say that. I felt it was better to kind of just plant little seeds along the way. So she claimed that no, that doesn't happen. I said, oh, okay, good. The reason I was asking is because, on the one hand, we have the Catholic Church, where my mom experienced still being accepted by her parents despite her beliefs changing. On the other hand, you have something like Scientology, where if you say that L. Ron Hubbard isn't who he claimed to be, and that Scientology isn't true, you're going to be disconnected from, you're going to lose your family. And I said, for me, that's, one of the ways that a religion kind of crosses a line into being a cult. And I even talked about how, with L. Ron Hubbard, disconnection wasn't originally meant to be that way, but disconnection became this way of controlling people through fear. And then I kind of just let that go. Another area that I caught her lying was, I asked her, what is it about her belief system that excites her? And she took me to the scripture in Revelation about every tear being wiped from your eyes, death being no more, etc., etc., which was always one of my favorites to use when I was preaching. And I tried to funnel that down into, how is that going to be accomplished? How is God going to get rid of wicked people? And she was very evasive through all of that. And finally I just said, listen, there's a question I want to ask that's difficult to ask, but do you believe that at Armageddon, anybody that's not a Jehovah's Witness is going to die? And she immediately said no, and told the story about God can read hearts and this sort of thing. which again is the story that I remember telling if people asked me that at the door. And I knew that it wasn't true, because the idea of exclusive salvation was one of the things that bothered me for the longest, since I was a teenager probably. The idea that only Jehovah's Witnesses were going to be saved bothered me. That means I knew that was a doctrine, even though I told people that no, we don't believe that, just like she did today. One other thing I'll mention is that Christian Freedom strongly encouraged them to do some Googling about the Australian Commission and other things. And the male Jehovah's Witness, the guy says, well, if you go online, the majority of the stuff you find about Jehovah's Witnesses is from ex-members who are disgruntled. And Christian Freedom said, well, they can't all be. And he says, well, some of them. And I says, well, that could be it. I asked him if he had ever heard of the Worldwide Church of God, because there are websites for ex-members of Worldwide Church of God made by ex-Worldwide Church of God members. And I said, I don't know a lot about them, but I know that they have similar doctrines: no Trinity, no hellfire, no immortal soul. The only big doctrinal difference is that they observe the Sabbath, but they are very strict. They believe that they're the one true church, and it's spiritually abusive. You know, you're told that doubting is a sin, and that if you leave, there's gonna be consequences. That's spiritual abuse. So the people that make these websites are victims of spiritual abuse, and they're trying to help those who are also victims to find healing. And so it's not really about being disgruntled, it's about trying to heal from spiritual abuse. Now, I let them connect the dots there. There was a number of times where it would have been easy to tip our hand and say more, and it might have felt good, but we all kind of, without even saying this ahead of time, all kind of just decided to keep it more indirect than that, and let them, like I said, connect the dots, and hopefully we planted some seeds. We speculated that they're a couple because they're both in their early 30s, a man and a woman. It seems unlikely that as Jehovah's Witnesses they would be out on the street together without a chaperone. To be honest, I'm not sure how that works, but it was just the two of them, so we were kind of thinking that it's likely that they were husband and wife. And who knows, maybe we got them both thinking enough that they can start having a conversation together. And how amazing would that be if they were to come out as a couple with each other's support. So who knows if that'll happen, but all I know is that it felt good to do, and it was my first time, and I look forward to doing more of it in the future. See, we're at 13 minutes, so sorry the video is running a little bit long, but thanks for watching and for sharing in my excitement a little bit.